before Walmart, before Amazon. There was Main Street, where every handshake meant something, and the butcher knew your name. On a Saturday morning in small-town America, the sidewalks would come alive. Doors swung open with the jingle of bells. The smell of bread drifted out of the bakery. Families strolled arm in arm, stopping to chat with neighbors who seemed less like acquaintances and more like an extended family. It wasn't just a place to shop. It was where life unfolded. The butcher stood behind the counter, wiping his hands on a white apron, ready to slice exactly the cut you wanted. He knew what your family liked because he had served them for years. Across the street, the barber shop was filled with chatter and laughter, where boys squirmed in chairs while their fathers traded stories. At the five and dime, children pressed their faces against glass counters, choosing penny candy with the same seriousness as any adult purchase. Credit wasn't a plastic card swiped through a machine, it was trusted. If your paycheck hadn't arrived yet, the grocer wrote your name in a small notebook and knew you'd settle it later. No contracts, no fine print. Just faith that neighbors looked out for one another. That system of unwritten promises carried a weight far stronger than any receipt could. For children, Main Street was freedom itself. They dashed from store to store, welcomed by name at every doorway. A handful of marbles at the toy shop, a soda at the lunch counter, a quick wave to the postman were small moments, yet they built a foundation of memory. Parents never worried much. The community was a net, always watching, always catching. There was a rhythm to it all. People walked slowly, not because they had less to do, but because the act of living was woven into the act of shopping. Every errand was a chance to meet, to talk, to feel part of something bigger than yourself. It was a world that reminded you where you belonged. Looking back, it wasn't perfect, but it was personal. Every door that opened came with a smile. Every purchase was tied to a face, and every street felt like home. The sound of footsteps on cracked sidewalks, the sight of painted signs, the comfort of neighbors knowing your story weren't luxuries. They had an ordinary life. But time doesn't stand still, and neither did America's way of shopping. It started with smaller, bigger stores, bigger parking lots. At first, it was exciting. Families who had grown up squeezing into narrow aisles and parking on crowded curbs now found themselves with space to breathe. The new supermarkets offered wide, gleaming aisles where carts could glide without bumping into neighbors, and shelves stocked with more choices than most people had ever seen in one place. For many, it felt like progress, modern, efficient, and almost futuristic compared to the creaky floors of Main Street shops. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, the shopping experience itself was being redesigned. No longer confined to the center of town, stores began appearing on the outskirts, where land was cheaper and parking was endless. Families could load the station wagon, pull into a vast lot, and walk right into a building that promised everything in one trip. For mothers balancing children and long grocery lists, it felt like a relief. For fathers who worked long hours, one stop on the weekend saved precious time. The appeal was undeniable. Bigger stores meant lower prices, thanks to bulk buying and streamlined supply chains. Free parking became a quiet revolution. No more hunting for a meter or rushing back before it expired. The convenience of grabbing groceries, clothes, and even hardware under one roof became irresistible. It was the birth of what would later be called one-stop shopping, and it rewired how Americans thought about running errands. But this shift came with subtle costs, ones not immediately obvious. Each family that drove to the edge of town was one less family strolling down Main Street. Fewer footsteps meant fewer conversations, fewer chance encounters, fewer children pressing coins into candy jars. Shopkeepers began to notice the difference in their registers, even as customers raved about the bargains they found at the bigger stores. The heartbeat of downtown grew quieter, one parking lot at a time. Car ownership made the change possible. With the freedom to drive anywhere, People no longer needed to rely on the cluster of shops within walking distance. The automobile became a shopping companion, a silent enabler of sprawl. The rhythm of life began to stretch outward, away from the intimacy of small sidewalks and into the vast space of suburban plazas. Shopping, once a communal ritual, was becoming an individual errand. The excitement of variety and low prices masked a deeper shift, the unraveling of the social fabric that Main Street had stitched together. Neighbors who once lingered at the bakery now hurried to push carts through fluorescent-lit aisles. Cashiers replaced familiar clerks, and shopping became faster, quieter, and more impersonal. It felt efficient, but it also felt different. But before the giants claimed the edge of town, they quietly set up shop on Main Street itself. Woolworths had grilled cheese. Jackpenny had creaky floors. Even the chains once felt like home. Before they became symbols of mass consumerism, these national names felt almost indistinguishable from the shops they stood beside. Their facades were brick, their windows filled with seasonal displays, their doors marked by the same jingling bells as the local 5 and dime. They didn't tower over Main Street. They blended into it. Walking past them, you didn't feel you were in some anonymous chain. You felt like you were still in your own town. Inside, the atmosphere was just as familiar. The aisles were narrow, the floors worn from decades of footsteps. Local hires stood behind counters, greeting customers by name. These weren't strangers sent from corporate offices far away. They were neighbors, classmates, even cousins. A purchase at Sears or Jackpenny wasn't just a transaction with a faceless company. It was a conversation with someone who lived down the road, someone who might stop by your church picnic or Little League game that weekend. For families, these stores became destinations, places where small rituals formed. A trip to Woolworths often meant stopping for lunch at the counter, a grilled cheese sandwich, a fountain Coke, maybe a slice of pie if you were lucky. The catalog desk at Sears wasn't just a service, it was a bridge to possibility. Children flipped through thick, colorful pages, circling bicycles or toys, while parents dreamed about new furniture or kitchen appliances. Picking up an order there felt exciting, like retrieving a long-awaited package that had traveled just for you. The chains carried with them the allure of big city variety, while still rooted in small-town charm. They offered clothes for the new school year, shoes that seemed to last forever, and household goods that made life feel a little more modern. Yet they never felt cold or distant. These stores were woven into the rhythm of American life, woven so deeply that entire generations remember the creak of their wooden floors and the hum of their fluorescent lights as part of their childhood soundtrack. In many ways, these early chain stores provided the best of both worlds. They brought national brands to small towns while still keeping the personal touch of community life. Families built traditions around them, whether it was buying Easter outfits at Jackpenny or picking up Christmas decorations at Sears. For many, these places marked milestones, not just purchases. Looking back, it's clear that these stores were more than buildings filled with products. They were part of Main Street as living memory extensions of the same trust and belonging that the butcher, the barber, and the 5 and dime had nurtured. The signs may have carried national names, but the experiences remained deeply local. But it wasn't long before these beloved names followed the money and the cars. The superstores didn't just sell more, they redefined what shopping meant in America. By the 1980s and 1990s, malls and shopping centers spread across the country like a new kind of Main Street, only bigger, brighter, and less personal. Families no longer walked downtown for errands. They drove out to sprawling complexes with endless parking lots and neon-lit entrances. What had once been a simple Saturday stroll became an all-day outing surrounded by food courts, chain stores, and the echo of footsteps on polished tile. Big box names like Walmart, Target, and Kmart grew rapidly, promising to do what no small-town shop could: offer everything in one place at prices that seemed unbeatable. The formula was simple and effective. Standardized layouts made these stores familiar no matter where you went. Whether you were in Ohio, Texas, or California, the shelves looked the same. The aisles stretched just as wide, and the checkout lines hummed with the same conveyor belts. Shopping became uniform, stripped of the quirks and character that once gave each town its own flavor. For many families, the shift felt practical. Why visit 3 or 4 small shops when you could find clothes, groceries, electronics, and toys under a single roof? Speed and convenience became the new currency of daily life. The ritual of chatting with the butcher or barber was replaced with pushing a cart under fluorescent lights, racing to finish errands before dinner. The pace of consumer life quickened, and efficiency was celebrated as progress. But in chasing this efficiency, something was lost. Human interaction, once central to the shopping experience, became secondary. Employees were no longer neighbors you knew, but strangers wearing name tags. Service became standardized, scripted, and often rushed. The warm familiarity of Main Street was replaced with the sterile hum of climate-controlled warehouses where the personal touch all but disappeared. Culturally, these stores reshaped America. They democratized access to goods, making variety affordable to millions. Yet they also blurred the uniqueness of the place. A Walmart in Kentucky felt no different from a Walmart in Oregon. Town identities, once anchored by local businesses, became overshadowed by the sameness of big-box branding. Shopping was no longer about connection. It was about consumption. And perhaps the most subtle change of all was the way convenience disguised decline. Families celebrated bargains without noticing what slipped away in the process. The slow fading of community bonds, the empty storefronts left behind, and the sidewalks that grew quieter with every passing year. What felt like progress was also the beginning of absence. And once the giants left, Main Street began to fade store by store, window by window. The barber closed. The bell on the door stopped ringing. And just like that, Main Street went quiet. What had once been the heartbeat of the town began to lose its rhythm. The familiar shops that had anchored generations, the hardware store, the five and dime, the corner cafe couldn't compete with the prices and convenience of malls and big box chains. Slowly, one by one, they closed their doors. Some shopkeepers retired with no one willing to take their place. Others filed for bankruptcy after years of declining sales. Even those who held on as long as they could eventually faced empty aisles and shrinking profits. The loyal customers who once kept them alive were now driving past downtown, heading straight for superstores on the edge of town. For the first time in decades, sidewalks that had bustled with neighbors and children were left bare. Storefronts stood empty, their windows collecting dust, for lease signs fading in the sun. Some were boarded up, others simply abandoned, their paint peeling and roofs sagging. What had once been bright and welcoming felt dark and forgotten. Walking through these streets was like walking through a memory. Shadows of laughter and conversation lingered, but life had drained away. The impact went deeper than economics. Towns felt hollowed out. Without local businesses, there were fewer places for neighbors to gather, fewer excuses to run into one another. Civic life shifted indoors or disappeared entirely. Where once a trip to the store meant a handful of conversations, now it meant a solitary drive, a quick purchase, and a return home. The loss of Main Street wasn't just about shopping. It was about connection. For many, it was personal. Childhood memories were tied to those spaces. The candy counter at the dime store, the red vinyl stools at the soda fountain, the way the barber's chair spun after a fresh cut. Those details were woven into the fabric of daily life. And when the shops disappeared, so too did the places where memories were made. People found themselves nostalgic for experiences they didn't realize they cherished until they were gone. And yet, Nostalgia only grew stronger as the physical spaces decayed. Empty buildings became monuments to what used to be, standing silently as reminders of a more connected past. The sound of a bell over a shop door, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the creak of floorboards in a department store, all of it survived only in memory. But it wasn't just stores we lost, it was something deeper. We gained speed, but lost our stories. Was it really worth it? The modern way of shopping promised efficiency, fast checkouts, endless choices, and lower prices. But somewhere along the way, the warmth that once defined everyday life began to fade. The personal touch of a butcher who knew your family's favorite cut of meat was replaced by a plastic-wrapped package pulled from a refrigerated shelf. The friendly nod of a shopkeeper became the cold beep of a barcode scanner. Self-checkout kiosks and long aisles made it possible to get in and out without speaking to anyone at all. On paper, it was progress. Fewer delays, more control, quicker errands. But in practice, it chipped away at the small human rituals that gave shopping its meaning. A simple, "How's your family?" or a shared laugh over the counter was no longer part of the transaction. What had once been connected became silent efficiency. Traditions eroded quietly. There was no farewell to the neighborhood grocer greeting customers by name. No ceremony marking the last child spinning on the barber's chair. These things simply disappeared, swallowed by a culture that valued speed over presence. Shopping, once a communal act, turned into a solitary task. The rhythm of errands shifted from slow and social to fast and transactional. The result was more than economic, it was emotional. As human interaction drained from everyday life, loneliness crept in. Neighbors who used to catch up on Main Street no longer saw each other. Strangers shared parking lots but not conversations. Consumerism promised abundance, but it often delivered isolation. We were surrounded by more things than ever before, but with fewer stories attached to them. A culture of buy and go replaced the lingering moments that once defined community. No longer did people pause at the lunch counter or stop to chat with the clerk sweeping the doorway. Instead, the goal became to move quickly, get what was needed, and leave. The clock dictated shopping, not connection. The soul of shopping was traded for convenience, and while the trade seemed logical at the time, its cost was far greater than most realized. Efficiency filled our homes with goods, but it emptied our days of the simple, shared experiences that made life feel connected. We became richer in products, but poorer in presence. And just when Main Street thought it couldn't get worse, something even bigger arrived. Then came Amazon, and the store in your town became a website. What began as an online bookstore in the mid-1990s quickly grew into something unimaginable. A marketplace without walls, shelves, or closing hours. With a few clicks, you could summon nearly anything to your doorstep, faster than any Main Street shop, faster even than the biggest mall. Convenience wasn't just redefined, it was unleashed. By the early 2000s, e-commerce was no longer a novelty. It was a tidal wave, reshaping every corner of American shopping. Platforms like Amazon, eBay, and later countless online retailers turned the world into a catalog. No lines, no parking, no waiting for stores to open. Just instant access, a digital card, and the promise of two-day delivery. The fallout was swift. Retail giants that had once toppled Main Street now found themselves collapsing under the same pressure. Names like Toys R Us, Borders, and countless department stores began to vanish. Their once busy aisles reduced to liquidation sales and empty storefronts. The very chains that replaced the butcher and the barber were now themselves replaced by servers and warehouses. The mall, once a teenage hangout and suburban symbol of abundance, became a relic. Foot traffic dwindled. Entire wings went dark. Anchors like Sears and Jackpenny icons for generations couldn't withstand the avalanche of online shopping. What convenience had once done to Main Street, digital commerce now did to the giants. For younger generations, the shift felt natural. Shopping was no longer an event or a ritual. It was a background task, as simple as sending a text. You could order groceries while riding the bus, buy clothes during a lunch break, or have gifts delivered without ever stepping foot in a store. Patience, once a built-in part of shopping, was replaced by expectation. Overnight delivery wasn't a luxury, it became the norm. But with that speed came another loss: the tangible, sensory experience of shopping. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the creak of wooden floors underfoot, the small thrill of carrying a paper bag home all faded into the glow of a computer screen and the thud of a cardboard box on the porch. Shopping became frictionless, yes, but also formless, stripped of the human texture that once made it meaningful. The digital avalanche didn't just change how we shop, it changed how we live. It redefined what it meant to wait, to want, to belong to a place. The marketplace was no longer a street or a plaza, it was the cloud. But just as it all seemed lost, something surprising began to happen. A new generation is discovering the charm of old storefronts and breathing life into the past. What was once dismissed as outdated or inefficient is now being rediscovered as authentic, meaningful, and worth preserving. Across America, towns are peeling back the layers of neglect, repainting the facades, and unlocking the doors of buildings that sat silent for decades. Main Street, thought to be gone forever, is stirring awake. Historic buildings are no longer seen as relics, but as treasures. Old brick storefronts are being restored into coffee shops, bookstores, and co-working spaces. Former hardware stores now host microbreweries where locals gather on Friday nights. The spaces that once housed five and dimes are alive again, filled not with chain goods, but with handmade crafts, artisan foods, and the hum of conversation. Farmers' markets spill across town squares, echoing rhythms of an earlier age. Fresh produce, homemade bread, and local honey draw families back to the heart of town, where shopping feels like an event again. Festivals and parades, once abandoned as communities drifted to malls, are returning as traditional moments where neighbors gather shoulder to shoulder, waving flags, clapping to music, and remembering what it feels like to belong. What's remarkable is that it's not just nostalgia from older generations fueling this revival. It's young people. Millennials and Gen Z, raised in a digital world, are seeking something more grounded. They crave experiences that can't be downloaded. The smell of roasted coffee in a corner cafe, the creak of floorboards beneath their shoes, the chance to know the person who made the product they're buying. To them, Main Street represents something missing in modern life: authenticity. This rediscovery is as much about identity as it is about economy. Supporting local shops isn't just a transaction, it's a statement of pride. It's choosing connection over convenience, character over conformity. Towns that once felt forgotten are finding new life through a blend of memory and imagination. What was old is being made new again, but without losing its soul. Nostalgia plays a powerful role, but it isn't simply about looking back. It's about carrying forward. The memories of the butcher, the barber, and the five and dime linger. And though their exact forms may not return, their spirit lives on in farmers shaking hands with customers, or artisans telling stories about their craft. Main Street becomes less about the past and more about a vision for the future. A future where community matters as much as commerce. Because no matter how much changes, one truth still holds. Main Street isn't just a place. It's a feeling. And in some towns, it's coming back to life. For all the changes that swept across America, the malls, the megastores, the endless scroll of online shopping, something deeper never disappeared. The essence of Main Street, the heartbeat of community, has always been there, waiting beneath the surface. It lives in the memory of jingling doorbells and worn wooden counters. It lingers in the smile of a shopkeeper who once knew your family by name. Even when the windows went dark and the sidewalks emptied, Main Street carried on in the stories people told, in the way they remembered what it meant to belong. Main Street is more than storefronts. It is trust. It is a connection. It is the unspoken promise that a town is more than its buildings, that it is its people. While retail giants rose and fell, while the digital age swept in with its convenience and speed, the desire for community never left. People still craved a place where a handshake mattered, where neighbors could pause and talk, where life felt personal instead of transactional. Nostalgia is not weakness, it is proof of longing. When people look back on the butcher, the barber, or the five and dime, they aren't simply remembering stores. They are remembering the security of being known. They are remembering the rhythm of a world where commerce and community walked hand in hand. And that longing has become fuel for revival, as towns across the country breathe new life into old streets. Main Street becomes a metaphor for resilience. It bends, it falters, but it never truly breaks. Every restored building, every farmer's market, every festival that returns is a testament to the fact that we never stopped needing each other. Even in a world of one-click purchases and doorstep deliveries, the pull of shared spaces endures. So maybe Main Street was never just about shopping at all. Maybe it was always about the spirit of togetherness, the kind that reminds us we are part of something larger than ourselves. And that spirit still beats, quietly but steadily, in towns big and small. If Main Street still lives in your memory, share your story, because keeping it alive starts with us.